Good afternoon. All right. Welcome, welcome. So today's session is about how DevOps is transforming IT. And I'm really excited here with a great panel to kind of have an interesting conversation. And if you folks have questions, please keep them going, because maybe we'll get a chance to even have you folks come to the microphone and ask some questions at the back end. So let's think about DevOps and this transformation, and there's a lot of talk about digital transformation and what's happening. But before I get into the details, the standard disclaimer, for any product things here, roadmap stuff, it's all futures, no promises yet on this stuff. But that said, so let's kind of talk about the digital transformation briefly. You've probably heard a lot about it already. You heard the phrase, software is eating the world. Kind of sounds a little, software is this fuzzy brain bits, kind of wandering around eating the world. It's kind of one of those things that it's hard to kind of visualize. But the good, what it's also going a little bit more prescriptive. It's saying, in this Darwinian evolution that's happening in the business world, in fact, now it's clear the fast will survive. It's not the big will survive. Usually it's the big will survive. But now it's like the fast will survive, so you don't necessarily have a disadvantage if you're small. The world is changing very fast. Big will not beat small anymore. It will be the fast that will be beating the slow. So it's about speed. And actually, think about what's enabling it. It's the technology. Actually, I just left my cell phone in my bag there because I didn't want it to ring here. But think about that cell phone for a minute. 30 years ago, that was a supercomputer. And now everybody has that supercomputer in their pocket. It's tethered to the net. It's got a phone. The supercomputers 30 years ago didn't have phones. It's got a gyroscope. It's got a camera. It's got all kinds of goodies that are just collapsing into that supercomputer. Everybody's wandering around. And I don't care what business you are. If you are not reimagining the way you interact with your customers, leveraging that supercomputer in their pocket, ouch, you are the digital dinosaur of the future. And how fast you can do it is what matters. So what features are you going to deliver, just as an example, on that supercomputer? Quickly. Think of banks today. It's becoming increasingly digital. How often do you actually go into a bank versus do things electronically? Imagine the first time when that bank came and took a picture of a check and said, yep, oops, I can deposit it through a picture of a check. Suddenly, the notion of physical locations and ATM versa tellers and all of that became less important. And you can imagine the conversation happening between the head of retail branch operations at a competitive bank and their central IT organization, saying, I need to respond to that, that feature they just added, taking a picture of a check and depositing it. And imagine if the central IT folks said, sure, please fill out this form, we will order the equipment, we'll get it on the deck, and that's a very short conversation. And so this need for speed is really being driven by this new competitive dynamics in this world of ether, in this world of software, in this world of the digital world, which is the digital transformation. And DevOps plays a key role in this whole sort of need for speed. And the bottom line is, the standard off-the-shelf stuff is not what's going to give you competitive edge. It's custom applications, and that's why a lot of companies are figuring out, how can I mine all the data I have? Can I get some unique insights that are going to separate me from my competition, deliver a better experience to my customers? So it's custom applications that need to be built. And hence, software development in those companies start to become of paramount importance. Most of the investment bankers are bigger software vendors than we are. Not vendors, but software, builders than we are. They have tens of thousands of software engineers. We have 7,000. I mean, we're pretty respectable, nice big size, but there are a lot of banks with tens of thousands of software engineers. So it is the software is eating the world, and as this Tesla example gives, here's another example. It's not related to the phone, but of another hardware platform that is software controlled. They wanted to raise the car by half an inch. It was just a software update. The next morning, your car was half an inch higher because they wanted to adjust it, or they wanted to change, the way the algorithm is working in this particular case, in the inverter algorithm, to get a little bit more oomph as you step on the pedal. It's all software. So clearly, this is becoming very, very important. And if you think about in this world, DevOps starts to play a really critical role, because that's the fulcrum where the speed either happens or doesn't. And the companies that can master that process are the companies that get the speed. And the companies that struggle with that process is where the friction in the gears is happening. And it's not an easy process to master, because there is actually a special relationship between developers and IT. And it's improving, by the way, because I think both sides realize they need each other. But, IT thinks dev asks too much, and they want too much change all the time. They don't get it. It's all about stability and availability, and we just can't willy-nilly throw things on. And dev is like, these guys are just way too slow, red tape, bureaucrats. Why do we have bureaucrats in our org? And it's a genuine dilemma, because IT is not trying to be bureaucrats. They're trying to make sure that they can have their custodians of this resource pool, and that resource pool is well managed and is secure and is compliant and all those other things. So this is a genuine dilemma. And this DevOps process is where the friction point on this dilemma really magnifies itself. So the reality is, they do need each other. In fact, they together are the heart of what is going to drive the speed in an organization, the innovation speed in an organization. So let's kind of look at this DevOps and what kind of challenges and transformation is required in the DevOps process. And it's a multifold issue. As dev and IT work and mesh their gears together, there is the people issue. And with people issue, there's a lot of people who've been doing stuff for many years, and they've seen it in a particular way. It's hard to change behavior. So how do you lead an organization to change that behavior? How do you involve early adopters, leaders, the people that seed new ideas in an organization, get them to kind of pollinate and spread ideas? How do you invest in automation? Because automation is key in this process. Because the more you can automate, the less error-prone the process will be, the less finger-pointing there'll be across the organizations, and there's more harmony in the organization. So how do you automate? And so scripting skills become important for the people. There's a whole skill base around. A lot of times IT doesn't appreciate what DevOps is. It's that thing those guys in the development team do. And how do you get IT to appreciate and actually do DevOps themselves internally? How do you do that? Think of the process side. How do you drive a process? I heard people say, hey, maybe the pendulum is starting to swing back because it's gone too far out in the sort of high speed, where it's shadow IT and all of that. The reality is, the pendulum is actually swung, and it's going to potentially continue to swing further, and IT is coming along to continue to drive governance, but in a lower friction format. So how do you change processes to make it more self-service, yet have the guardrails on to be able to govern that? How do you do automated release through a complete CI/CD process, with a lot of automation? How do you have smaller, frequent releases where you're involving your customer up front in the release cycle, not this big waterfall release, then a beta cycle, and then by the time you get feedback, it's way too late to change anything anyway. So how do you make those adjustments? And then finally, it's technology. And the thing is, by the way, even if you don't have all the technology, you can still work on people and process. So you don't have to wait for this perfect technology, crescendo to happen before you start to do anything like this. So how do you drive technology that enables automated pipelines, on-demand infrastructure as code, integration of DevOps tools, et cetera? So to talk a little bit about this, how we did it at VMware, and in fact, within the CMBU, we ourselves went through a transformation process. 2 years ago, we used to deliver on-premise releases every 18 months, and now we've sped it up considerably. So some of the leaders that actually drove that, I'd like to kind of invite them on the stage. But before I do that, there's a little video I want to play. Let's roll the video on the CMBU transformation.
With Project Kava, we drink our own champagne. Many customers have the same profile as our developers. They have to set up their builds almost on a daily basis. We have 450 developers using Project Kava, and it's growing significantly every month.
Operating at the scale of 4,000 managed machines, 450 managed users, puts us on the scale of a lot of enterprise customers, whether it's vRealize Business, Operations, or Automation, putting it into production for the Cloud Management Business Unit and for our developers to consume, to make them more efficient and effective.
VRA's service catalog, event broker service, VRO server, infrastructure service, and software components function in harmony to deploy operational VRA environments hosted in vCenter in under an hour using a single click on our VRA request page.
Kava allows us to set up a burner VRA instance within a click of a button, complete with test users and groups. Kava also automatically reclaims old VRA instances, so we won't have to.
VRBC, VROps, and VRLI track our infrastructure costs and resources and logs.
Once I get that email from Kava, I can very quickly just SSH into the system and just deploy whichever piece I happen to be working on and test it. Just think about how much more time it would have taken if you had to actually do the fresh install yourself.
We have customers who've taken some of the content that we've built in Project Kava. Swisscom, for example, just published a blog post last month about this.
We're also working with other VMware initiatives, such as VMware Cloud on AWS, which we're putting into production now.
It's time tested, the uptime, the scale, the resiliency of the product has only gotten better because we have large amount of usage within the company.
And so to discuss how VMware did it within our business unit, I'd like to invite Sandhya Sridharan, our VP of Engineering at VMware, and Brian Halter, Senior Manager at VMware. Welcome, Sandhya.
Thank you, Ajay.
Welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
So hi, everyone. I'm Sandhya Sridharan, Vice President Engineering, Cloud Management Business Unit. Our primary focus is on time to value improvement, around developer productivity tooling and operations, focused on CI/CD and service reliability engineering functions. Now, as we navigate through this dynamic industry landscape, that requires constant evolution and transformation, we're focused on 3 priorities. Laser focus on customer centricity, continuous improvement on quality, and relentless pursuit to make sure we are constantly increasing our engineering velocity. So what is Project Kava and why? Why did we choose to do it? Right? If you look at it, every developer or a test engineer has the requirement to deploy an environment in a variety of configurations, either to develop new features, to debug code, bug fixes, to do scale performance testing, before any code actually reaches up to production. So Kava is our internal production system with a variety of SDDC product deployments. We have vRealize Automation. So with vRealize Automation, an engineer can just come in and make a request to a blueprint. That blueprint could be a build, a recommended build of any of our releases with a specific configuration, with a specific version, right? And for their coding or testing needs. And then they can actually create a blueprint. You no longer have this engineer doesn't have to rely on, say, a cloud admin or a DevOps admin to actually create a blueprint for them. They can create it themselves and share it with other engineers. So they're becoming more self-reliant. We have vRealize Operations and we have vRealize Business for Cloud. that we use to make decisions around capacity and cost, which actually helps our organization as well. Then with vRealize Log Insight, we used for log analytics and troubleshooting and manage our build and release pipelines through vRealize CodeStream. We have NSX in our production system. We have vSAN in our production system. So as you can see, this is our true internal production deployment. So Project Kava is primarily internal. It's not an external product, but it includes all of our SDDC deployment that our engineers use almost on a daily basis. Right, so now let's look at some of how say a developer comes in and how long it would take for a developer to actually provision and set up a build environment so that they can actually start coding. Right, so before Kava, we had an engineer would have to come in, create a deployment, about 2 hours, do the initial configuration, create an endpoint, create some network configurations, and then do the content loading. About 4 to 5 hours of work before a developer can be fully productive. That is, before he or she can even actually start writing code or to make any test changes. This is just setting up your dev environment. How is it done now with Kava? The entire process is now down to 1 hour. Right? So this is huge, 4x productivity gain for our engineers. So now because of Project Kava, our engineers are very self-reliant. We have enabled them to drink their own champagne. Right? So they have the control of their destiny. They don't have to rely on ops admin or a DevOps admin to create their images for them to start being productive. So this is how we have accelerated their productivity and velocity within the engineering organization. Now, my colleague here, Brian, will give you a demo on how our engineers are using Project Kava.
Thanks, Sandhya. So to Ajay's point earlier, operations teams need to take on more scripting and more automation to be successful. In the CMBU, we've gone the other way. We've taken software engineers and we've made them more like an operations team. And with that, we've built our own internal cloud called Project Kava, where we manage 5 different vCenters. We provide automation across all of those. And that helps our engineers not have to worry about which vCenter are they going to provision into. Is there enough capacity? Where's maintenance being done? Instead, what they do is, and follow along with me, the one click to log in, right? So they log into the VRA portal. And then they can go to the catalog where they see what are the items that are available to them. So the one they're most familiar with, VRA, is there, and that works for a lot of different versions of VRA, but they also have things that they need to integrate with. So whether it's ESX, whether it's VROps, whether it's Log Insight, whether it's VRBC, those things are in the catalog now, so it's not I have to go remember how to deploy these things. So what they do, click 2, is say that they have a request. And now, in the request form, click 3, pick which build they want. So they can pick a milestone build, they can pick a nightly build, and they hit submit. So 5 clicks in. Now, they've been able to kick off the provisioning process. They can go back to doing productive work. So that took what, about a minute, tops, including the login? What happens then at the end of the cooking show is that they get an email that says, here's your machine. It was successfully provisioned. And that's a virtual appliance. It's a SQL Server database. It's all of the IaaS components of VRA. And they get a link that says, here's your tenant. Not only do you have a VRA, you have a VRA that has enough content in it that you can actually start testing. So they click on the link, and they get taken to their VRA. And now they can go log in. And they get taken immediately to their new instance. It has tenants, it has tenant admins, it's configured. And we've delivered them automation. We've saved them now not only 4 hours because we do it in 1 hour instead of 5. We've actually saved them 4 hours and 45 minutes because they're ready to go in almost no time. So that was the first win. But now we've created a new problem. Now we have a critical system. So we need to know about capacity. We need to know about network outages. We need to know about slow performance. And so that's where vRealize Operations comes in. It tells us about our capacity. It tells us what can be reclaimed. It shows us alerts. And so this really helps at the end of the year, too, when I have to go and ask for more capacity, because now I have data to back up what I'm getting. And then at the end of that, we have everything around VRBC. So now I can start doing show back to the teams for the resources that they're consuming. One of the things that we did earlier this year is we added the VMC project as an endpoint. We did this, we didn't tell any of the engineers. We just said, keep using VRA. And about a week after we started, we said, congratulations, you've been using it for a week. And we hadn't gotten any feedback yet. So by abstracting all of this away, we made engineers successful, and now we can be a truly hybrid cloud story for the enterprise. So with that, I'll throw it back to Sandhya. And
back to Ajay.
Ajay.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate that. So folks, Brian just gave us a demo on Project Kava. So what I wanted to do next was invite one of our customers, David Coker from SVP of Information Systems from Polaris Alpha. Welcome, David.
Oh. Hey, how you doing? Thank you. Thank you,
David. That's the clicker. You can press the little horn.
Just the green one. Welcome, everybody. It's a big crowd, so it's nice to see everyone here. It's actually a pretty important topic for us, as it seems to be for you. Polaris Alpha, as a company, is only about a year old, but the components that make up the company go back as much as 35 years. I've been with the company for nearly 12 years, of which 10 of those I was on the business side. And so I was driving product and deliveries, and I'll talk a little more about what the company does. But about 2 years ago, we kind of started rethinking the business a bit and trying to figure out how do we actually make ourselves move faster. As RJ was saying, speed is actually pretty important even in the industries that we participate. And as a summary, we're a defense contractor, and you tend to think, well, big, slow, monolithic, but that's really not how you compete in the defense space. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Oops. Okay, so I'm the Senior VP of Information Systems. In our company, that kind of means a variety of things. I run IT, I run all the facilities, the infrastructure. I also take care of licensing and procurement. But one of the things that's most important is I'm also responsible for all the developer systems. The chart says 300 plus. It's actually more like 500 plus software engineers out of about 1,300 people. So as a culture, we really are a software company that purely targets the government, primarily the defense, intel, and homeland security functions. So in some ways, it's a little odd. You got to realize the way we make money, we don't sell what we make. The government pays us to build, and at the end, they get it for free, and they can use it as much as they like. So whether we deploy it to one person or thousands, it's really gives the government the flexibility to do what they need to do. So for example, we've impacted things like we build systems that have made huge impacts in the Afghan conflict. We do a lot of homeland security tools, and they don't really have to think about, can I scale up to my needs? We do border patrol stuff, so as they add more staff, it's not like, well, how do I manage that license problem? They pay us, we build it and deliver it, and they can deploy it, and it can make whatever impact they see fit. And more importantly to them, it actually is built towards their requirements. And as you can see in the world today, the requirements are changing quite quickly. The world is not the same. The missions that our customers are trying to tackle constantly evolve. If you were asked 3 years ago what was our main concern, it would be towards the east. Today you're thinking more China, North Korea are concerned. So, and you say, well, you just use the same tools. They're not the same problem. They're very different problems. So in terms of the company, we're actively also going through an M&A process. In the defense industry, it's very difficult to be competitive without scale. But at the same time, our differentiator has always been speed and agility. We're able to do things fast. We've been doing iterative cyclic development before the term agile even was around. It's just been in our DNA for all these years. And we expect to be twice as big as we are today in about a year. The other thing is we're a Java EE shop. or a JEE shop traditionally. And over the last 3 to 5 years, we've been transforming into decomposable, primarily containerized solutions. And the reason for that is it allows us to speed up our delivery. We can break down these very large, complex, monolithic systems and make them a lot more easy to manage. We can develop faster and turn out solutions much quicker. In fact, one interesting case is we actually have a VM that we delivered to the government that was built about 6 years ago. It's 1.5 terabytes. It's because the technology in the day didn't allow for decomposition, but it actually works. So it's amazing, and we're now figuring out how do we now decompose that in a modern world. In terms of tool sets, we've been VMware for over 10 years. And during that time, we've been slowly picking up more and more pieces. And lately, we've really been adopting more. We have NSX. In some ways, our challenge is we scale up, we scale out. And the other term we like to use is we scale deep. And the reason for that is the complexity of the environments we go into. A lot of commercial companies, you're able to control your deployment environment. When you deliver to the government, one of your biggest challenges is, in fact, that they have environments tailored to their needs. We're trying to build code and products that are reusable across the Navy, the Army, things like that. So how do you do that in a way that you're not recoding from scratch? And so we started down the container path about 5 years ago, because on one extreme you have Hadoop-based as a complex environment, then you have Cloud Foundry as another target, and then you have very old traditional environments as well. And we also support out what they call the tactical edge. Talk about IoT, the military has IoT in spades. It's just everywhere. And the problem is communication is a tough problem. And like the slide says, we really focus on paths. So from a company point of view, I'm kind of caught in the middle. You know, the programs want flexibility, they want things timely, they want it relevant. And since the technology is continuing to evolve, and just to give you a sense, we're supporting systems we delivered 12 years ago, and systems we'll deliver maybe 2 years from now. That's 14 years of technical evolution. Think about that, and it's in one environment. That's when I say scale deep. It's really that complexity is what I'm getting at, so that, you know, as the usage goes up, but also the complexity increases as another dimension. And from a company point of view, of course, we all have the concern about compliance, SLAs, and security from a company point of view, as well as our customers, is number one in their minds. So in terms of DevOps, it's really our mindset. This is how we do everything. When I took over IT about 2 years ago, I walked into a shop that was not aligned with the company. Good people, poor processes. They were thinking, well, we're just going to do things in kind of an I'd call it old school way, traditional way. And coming from the business side, I was one of the louder, people that was unhappy. So when we restructured the company, the CEO was like, well, since you complain the most, you can go fix it. You can go work with those people. And I was like, it wasn't a choice. It was you are now in charge and go forth. And one of the things I did is I was like, well, I was really leading our charge towards, containerized architectures and DevOps on the product side. I was like, well, I should be able to just bring that mindset forward. And part of it is I brought a few people who are just key in the thought leadership within the company, and said, look, we're now going to do IT. I know you like to do product, but we're doing IT. We're going to make the products better, and we're going to get them out to our customers faster. So, so when I started looking at the existing skill sets, this whole idea of, bimodal is a big topic. And I will tell you up front, I'm not a fan. I have a small team. I have like 30 people. And the challenge I have is I want those 30 people to be here today, tomorrow, 2 years from now. They're good people. They have a range of skills. We have a range of systems in terms of legacy and other things. So the point is, from a multimodal approach, we apply DevOps to everything we do. It's more of a mindset, and the tooling can be applied to those 12-year-old systems, to our HR systems, things like that. It's not something we think, well, we'll do this one way, we'll do that the other way. Everything is done the same way. Even though maybe the way you implement at the end of the day is a little bit different, but the mindset and everybody's kind of moved forward. And I can tell you, I went from a group where staff churn was high and we didn't have anybody leave for 18 months. I didn't have a single attrition in 18 months because everybody was bought in. They're like, this is cool, we feel like we're making progress. It's a big deal, right? Let's see, in terms of the things we looked at collaboration, the technology suite, we can talk a lot more as we get into details, but we're always, the idea is to keep learning. I actually am a physicist by training, so I'm a scientist. I'm about failing. That's what scientists do. They fail a lot to succeed. So the idea of being in a learning environment has been key to adopting DevOps, because a lot of things we're doing, there aren't well-established best practices. So you got to be willing to fail and let your team fail in a safe way and learn from it. So the other is we try to make small incremental changes. We're actually doing live updates, real-time updates on live systems. And again, we're failing fast. One thing I noted today is I got an email from one of my leads. We actually, as part of Polaris Alpha, we've been converting our finance and HR systems to the new network. We actually flipped the entire payroll system to a new network this morning. And I had actually forgotten that it was going to happen today because I wasn't worried about it. Because, just the way we're doing things has really been impactful. And so it worked. It was pretty cool. I was like, oh, wow, this actually does work. So I was pretty happy to see that. So kudos to the team. It was a big effort. So what do we need from VMware? I love the company. We get a lot of good support, but we're also pushing them because we rely on them to run our company. So it's not optional that they have to be innovative because we're innovative, right? So the things I kind of beat them up on is self-service provisioning has to be better. We've been now evolving towards vRealize automation. We just did a thing for the Army actually, where we took a system that used to take 3 to 4 weeks to provision and set up, and we've got it down to an afternoon. And we demoed this to the Army, and it's one of their future technologies. So showing them that we can be a good DevOps partner to them and help them move faster, quite a success. And actually the guy who did it is in the audience here. So basically we want to increase the pace at which containers. We were very happy with the PKS announcement, obviously. We've been there and we've got a homegrown thing. We'd love to do less homegrown and focus more on business value. The other thing is we don't build 12-factor apps. We build the necessary apps. So therefore, we need an infrastructure that's stable because we don't want to really have to spend that energy building it into our solutions. We'd rather defer that out and focus on solving and tailoring to the domains. In other words, keep building stable stuff, RJ. So we really appreciate it. Good. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Yeah. Next, I'd like to invite Julie Ray, CIO and Senior VP at Fannie Mae.
Great. Nice to see you.
Welcome, Julie.
Okay, great. It's an honor to be here. Last time I was in Vegas speaking, I got married complete with Elvis impersonator. So this trip hopes to be just as exciting. That's a true story, still have the ring. But anyway, it's great to be here. How many of you have mortgages here in the U.S.? Almost everybody. So if you do, it's likely that you have Fannie Mae providing stability and liquidity for your mortgage. So Fannie Mae really does provide liquidity, stability for the housing market here in the USA. Just by way of introducing myself, when I received the call from Fannie Mae on recruiting, I said, I think they have the wrong number. Because I was out of Cisco Systems and EMC, and by way of background, really was a tech platform person. And like Ajay said, software really is eating the world. And what Fannie Mae is really looking to do is get more about the technology, because technology really has become the business. So what I'm going to share with you today is something called Rapid IT. I have only been at Fannie Mae a short time. We have some brilliance in the audience. We've got Trent and any other Fannie Mayers in the audience? Okay, great. Hi, welcome. And I don't see Steve here. But Trent is one of the originators of Rapid IT, which I'm going to cover today. Okay, so back in 2012, Fannie Mae had a problem that many companies face, and that was around production stability. The infrastructure wasn't performing well, the applications were having trouble. And a lot of this was root cause to be the fact that the non-production environments really did not mirror production. and therefore any of the testing that was done was somewhat invalid, as you know. And so that was one of the problems. The second problem was that in 2012, Fannie Mae was really getting more and more about digitization, and the number of initiatives that were software-centric were climbing astronomically. And so to the degree that the provisioning for lower environments and some of the work that had to be done was really a hurdle to where Fannie Mae wanted to go. So Rapid IT was built as the solution to transform the IT provisioning process. And Rapid IT is really the marriage of two great products. One is VMware's vRealize Automation, and the other is Puppet Enterprise. And what this allowed Fannie Mae to do was really consistent, repeatable provisioning of VMs, and then also the configuration part of the puzzle. And then the other thing that Rapid IT did was it tied into a lot of the, what I'll call Fannie Mae specific shared services in the background. So this was built internally at Fannie Mae and has been wildly successful. Full automated provisioning of the web servers, the app servers, and the databases. If you look at the metrics and the wins from the Rapid IT deployment, talk about speed to delivery again. The cycle time went from a high of 12 weeks to provision VMs all the way down to 2 weeks, push of a button, and in some cases, much less than that. Provisioning, you can see close to 2,000 VMs since February 2015. And you can see the massive amount of work hours in the provisioning cycle time that was reduced. And the process went from many, many hands-on steps using the IT engineer's time to get the result. And then the last slide here, if I can get it to go there, shows a high level of the Rapid IT component diagram. And I'm not going to cover this in detail, but you can see vRealize at the center with the portal to do your ask around the provisioning. You can see the blueprints that you heard about earlier that are then stored and shared. You can see the workflow integrating with our CMDB through the VRO. And then you can see the orchestration into Puppet for the configuration management, and then the VMs at the backside, okay? And provisioning, again, the VMs isn't necessarily the hard part, but this is all a continuum that then hooks into our own internal shared services as well, all right? And has worked really, really well. So with that, I'll conclude, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. So thank you, Julie. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sandhya. So we'll kind of switch the format a little bit here into a panel here, and I've got a few questions to key it off. So maybe, Sandhya, if you could start with, you kind of mentioned the Kava journey. Could you maybe talk about a little bit more about the journey and what the results were?
Sure. I think if you look at the results, I can categorize, it's very tangible in terms of what we were able to achieve. I can pinpoint it to probably maybe keep it to 3 areas. One is around, with Kava, since my team managed the Kava deployment, we were customer zero, right? So we were kind of, as part of our champagning, so any issues or gaps that we saw in terms of either managing Kava or in terms of developers not be able to use the environment, those were getting addressed within anywhere from 4 to 5 weeks, right? And that actually because of those fixes, our customers were able to take direct advantage of those fixes as well. And then as we talk about speed, and because of Kava and the bunch of automation that we did, on an average about 18 months ago, a developer check-in would take anywhere from 2 to 2.5 weeks to make it up to a recommended build for an on-prem product. Now we are down to a day. Within 24 hours, a check-in actually now goes check-in made into production. And in fact, for our SaaS production environments, it's 4 to 6 hours, right? And then because of these agility and speed, what we also found that 90% of the issues that our customers were reporting were getting addressed in a very quick, with very quick turnaround time. So for an on-prem product, within the next release cycle, we were able to, either whether it were feature gaps or bug fixes, and then now as part of our SaaS production, any gaps that the customers report, we are able, because of that agility, we are able to push the code to production within like 2 to 3 weeks time. So I think that's the speed and the result. And of course, the journey didn't happen overnight. It took us about 18 months to get to where we are, but it was painful, but we've seen immense results so far.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sandhya. So obviously this journey, any of these journeys requires managing a cultural shift to make sure that DevOps happens. So maybe David, if you could comment on the kind of things and how do you get this cultural work done?
Yeah, that's a hard problem. Yeah, culture is sticky. That's the way I look at it. So when I walked into the IT group, morale was kind of low. I had brought some outsiders in, and of course they were all thinking they're just going to lose their jobs and get replaced by the people who shared my mindset, right? And that was furthest from what I was trying to achieve. And so part of the way I achieved success on the culture side is you have to define some small victories. And even if those victories take you longer than you'd like to see, you got to let the team do it. There was a thing I'm like, well, this should take a week. 2 months later, we still weren't there. But basically in 10 weeks we got there. Guess what? It was worth it. It was worth not meeting the milestone because ultimately it was about getting the team to meet the milestone. And just incrementally doing those kind of things, really you start building trust again. And once people trust, like, yeah, this is actually a good way of operating, even the biggest naysayers, within 6 months are like, I'm actually on board with this. I'm excited now. So that was kind of our approach, incremental, yeah.
Great. Kind of related to that, maybe Julie, you could comment on this in terms of the skill and the skill gaps. You feel like where is the organization today? What are the gaps to kind of take it to this new DevOps world?
Yeah, I inherited a really great technology team. In fact, I have to say, out of the gate, impressed with the technical depth of the team. But I think as you get into a DevOps world, it's a lot about collaboration. It's a lot about really working closely with your customers in the agile development cycles. And it also is really a collaborative effort, I think, from what I'd call the classic engineer and test function. Originally, back not at my current job, my prior one, I saw some conflict between the early DevOps days, where the testing guys were saying, hey, how do I fit in if the developer is now going to be deploying to production? And so what we did was some kind of cross-pollination there, where we actually melded the two teams and got the testing guys focused on some of the new engineering that they were able to pick up and learn.
Great. Some great ideas there. Some early victories, cross-pollination across the teams. The other challenge with the IT organization is always that as you kind of build new capabilities to promote and advertise yourself to the development and business organizations. So how do you tackle that issue? Either one of you want to tackle that?
I have a good example.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things that the provisioning issue, like Kava is solving, one of the things we have is that our CTO is actively pushing people to go to containers and these type architectures, which means you need a lot of velocity in the process. And one of the things that I asked my team to focus on is like, how do we automate this? Because we are the bottleneck. And within a couple of months, they actually built up a self-provisioned Jenkins pipeline that basically can scale to 3 to 100 instances in minutes, and it just scales up and down. Nobody's involved. And once the developer community that are in the BUs, not in my group, started seeing like, wow, this actually works, and I'm getting fast feedback, they're like, we want more of that. We want to do more of these kind of things. And again, it's another victory, right? You got to get victories to build credibility, because there is a trust challenge. So,
yeah. I think IT classically is not good at advertising what they have as far as capabilities. One thing I've seen done at Fannie Mae that I really like is called Tech Connect, where they actually invite all of the application groups in to see what's available. And then I think you get the momentum. The minute people try things and they get the lift out of it, right, and they get the wins, then it really starts to catch on.
We also brought in marketing. Believe it or not.
That's always a good idea.
We brought in marketing to help because we're like, how do we sell this? And that's what they do, right?
I recall, I think, David, you saying you ran marketing in the past.
I did. I was also marketing VP at the time. So
unfair advantage.
I had another staff that was ready to help. So yeah, it was great.
Great. So from a process standpoint, what are some of the key services that IT offers now? And particularly sort of in the DevOps realm. Any of you want to?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I need to think about that one for a minute. We offer the classic provisioning by button pushing. We've offered some testing that's, I think, kind of interesting, where you can spin up your test data sets in an automated fashion. Trent, I'll let you jump in if you want to. I've got people in the audience. But I think some of the wins for us have been around the provisioning and then around data testing.
Great.
Data sets.
Great. No, thank you.
I mentioned a word in my intro about scaling deep.
Yeah.
So let me explain what that means. So since we target so many different environments, we adopted NSX a couple of years ago because by hand to configure all the policies and the little networks was a real bottleneck in our system. So one of the services we offer is we really just have all these policies on the shelf waiting for programs who are like, well, I'm targeting, the Coast Guard or the Army. I mean, I'm not going to go into detail, but at that kind of level, and it allows them not only to provision quickly, but provision in a way that's applicable to the environment they're trying to support, and that has made a huge difference in their productivity at the end of the day. So
great.
Yeah.
So actually, maybe on that front, on developer productivity, could any of you maybe comment on what are some of the major milestones you've hit, from maybe a year or 2 years ago to now?
I think for us, Rapid IT was the major milestone, right, where people can self-provision. I think the other one is, again, people can pull their own data in an automated fashion right from the production data sets, and the masking occurs in an automated fashion. So I think it's really about automating every step of the developer's life that you can get to.
Yeah, and I'd say we one of the key metrics because as our company, you got to realize we get paid when developers are typing. Because we get paid, that's how we make money. We don't make money by shipping, we make money by doing and by developing. So being able to empower these people to develop more is how we build a government. And so we used to have the point where we could do maybe 12 builds simultaneously and people would be around and there wouldn't be productivity. Being able to automate all that and basically self-drive it, I mean, it is totally flipped our productivity on its head. So our ability to scale up programs and get more people involved, it has driven revenue in that regard. So
great.
So one of the milestones, we've had some early wins, but one of the biggest milestones was recently, I think this past Monday, we announced our cross-cloud, right? So as part of this journey that we've been doing was primarily started for our on-prem. So we've had this kind of mantra that SaaS first, right? So but we kind of went to SaaS first with our on-prem products. But because of all the changes and the transformation and the agility that we've been working towards, it took us actually, significantly less time to be ready for SaaS. Now, actually, our best time, every code gets pushed to production anywhere from, depending on the complexity of the code, it's 20 minutes to 4 hours. So that's like a huge milestone that I can think of for our most recent services.
Great. The other thing you hear a lot about in the organization is this area of giving self-service to the development teams.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, where you are in that process. Do you do that? Is that something in the plans?
I think that is our plan. That would be our strategy, to get as much self-service out there that we can, and get the adoption, help the developers get the adoption as well. Whether that's in the continuous integration, whether it's in the test realm, in any area of that. I think the other area that we talked about at breakfast this morning that was interesting is really some of the capabilities that are now automated around comparing the clouds. When am I on-prem? When am I in AWS? I think that becomes another very interesting one to share, not with just the IT and application people, but with the business to make decisions on where your deployments are actually going to happen.
Great.
And I agree with that, because as we've had more and more success, the CFO is starting to ask, well, who's using this? So what are they doing? How are they using it? And we need to be able to answer those questions. They don't want to stop it, but it's become such a high-profile activity, and it's impactful that it's getting the attention of people who normally would not be asking questions. So,
so that actually triggered another, Julie, your comment about, do you use the private cloud, public cloud, the cost and all of that. So obviously the public cloud is a big enabler of the DevOps and developer communities. I'm just curious, how your organization's going to think about the public cloud in the context of this area.
Yeah, for me, I'll take that one. When I took the job that I have currently, I walked in the door and it was a rush to the public cloud. And coming out of the platform companies, it kind of stopped my heart a little bit, just because the magnitude of the dollars are enormous, in the trillions with a T. So when someone says, gee, I'm going to put everything in the public cloud and that's my cloud strategy, and you're in my position, it gives you a little bit of a pause. So we've actually rethought our strategy. We're now in a hybrid cloud strategy with both a public and an on-prem play. I think it's all about really rationalizing your applications and making thoughtful choices about what workloads you're going to run in each. And so that is now our strategy, and we're in the process of the application rationalization. I do think the cost is a really interesting question, because in every company I've worked at, not just the current one, but prior companies, it's very hard to get a true cost on your IT applications that's all inclusive. And so it's tempting to look at a public cloud option completely, but I think that there are several people that I'm aware of that kind of rushed too much into the public realm without reaching a balance, and it ended up costing them quite a bit of money on the consumption side.
Great, thank you. David, any thoughts from you?
Given our industry, sensitivity of what we do is always paramount. So we are looking at public cloud, but it's a cautious type of thing, and we're trying to figure out how to do it in a way that's compliant with all the regulations and stuff that we have to do. But the other thing about being in the government provider is the way the cost and all the regulations we have to adhere to. Cost predictability is a huge part of making our company successful. So even if something's more expensive, but it's predictable, that's actually probably going to get picked. So it's the predictability and being able to plan because of the way government rates and the way they regulate the way you can build them. There's a lot of oversight there, and we have to make sure that we can adhere to that oversight effectively. So
what you're saying is, with things on premise, at least you can feel more confident about it being predictable.
That's correct. Exactly. And then also, even if we get to a cloud, the thing that's kept us back a little bit is it's a different skill set traditionally. I know we saw the AWS announcement, so that's interesting, obviously, because it's the same skill set across clouds. But investing in new skills when budgets are tight is a difficult proposition, and so I have to figure out where are we going to be most efficient in terms of what we're familiar with. So that weighs heavily as well.
I'm curious, you folks talked about cost and measuring cost and all of that. I mean, what kind of tools are you using today to keep a tab on what the infrastructure is costing, be it on-prem or public?
We use a combination of tools. We use Apptio to do our IT side of the equation, and then married with some of our internal financial systems currently.
Yeah, we have, being our business, we track every hour of labor very well. So we know exactly what labor we're using. So the labor side of it is very easy. And then, since the costs are, we buy them and we depreciate them. So we have a pretty good sense of how those are accounted for. So those models are actually pretty solid. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and at VMware we use our own products. We realize business for cloud, and we also have our cost insight service that we have now starting to use to see where we are actually spending and how we can project our costs.
And we talked about that at breakfast this morning, which I wasn't aware of that product suite, which is, I think, interesting because we also talked about the more, when you play a best-in-breed strategy and you're buying all these products from different vendors and then trying to knit them together, it requires a very sophisticated staff. And sometimes that's hard to come by just because, great people are hard to find. So I think it's an interesting proposition that VMware has come out with.
And we've started playing around with it because we're learning the tool. Because we'd like, we can do the post analysis, but it's more of the real-time feedback as we make decisions. So decision support is kind of where we're going, and we're hoping we haven't gotten there. We're hoping that'll be a part of our toolkit. So.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Another topic I want to briefly touch on is, we all hear about shadow IT. Mm-hmm. And so I'd love to kind of get your perspective in your organizations and, and how tolerant or not, or what, the perspectives on shadow IT.
I have strong opinions on shadow IT because I actually used to run the largest shadow IT at EMC, which is how I wound up in IT as well. So I feel now that I'm in IT, obviously shadow IT can bloat and become too expensive. However, it is the future, right? When you talk about speed to value, companies are going to do in each organization what it takes to get the job done. Yeah. And I think shadow IT is a good thing. I think IT's position in that is to provide the right guardrails and the right automated tooling so that other parts of the business can do what they need to do, but do it within a playground or sandbox that IT has provided to allow the appropriate tooling and guardrails to happen.
Oh,
great.
We have the same genesis. I was the source of the biggest shadow IT as well, and then I was moved over. So I was the problem that I had to undo. But I look at it a little differently. I would argue that it's from a business point of view, if the more the business units are spending on those kind of things, the less they're putting their intellectual capital into delivering business goods. So my view is to get my team to the point where we are a solid technical advisor and partner and service delivery agent to the rest of the company. Now that's a challenge because everybody's evolving. Like you said, the business units need to move really fast. And part of what I spend a lot of my time thinking about is where do I need to be in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? And so the other thing I pitch to the business leaders is we're actually IT can fail. Business units can't. They've got to keep delivering on the business, but IT can take those technical risks. We can try things that the businesses are starting to, just gestate a little bit. We can actually try it for them, get those skills, and get some perspective and bring the value back to them. So that's kind of how I'm trying to position my team as best I can. It's an ongoing debate, right? It's not an easy one, but that's the approach I'm trying to take.
I think you do want to test and learn and eat your own dog food in IT, but again, I think I think the business is going to do what they need to do to move quickly, and I think that's okay within a set of parameters.
But even within the business, right? I mean, from wearing the engineering hat, we're trying to be less dependent on IT, right? I mean, even the operations or IT, for example, this new concept of SRE, the service reliability engineering. So as part of this big transformation, we now have engineers actually carry pagers, right? Till the birth of the code to the death of the code, they are responsible, whether it's on dev stage or production. So that's kind of being, from the business unit perspective, kind of having less reliance of external sources, but kind of more be accountable and responsible for what you put it out there.
Mm-hmm. So clearly the business is much more engaged in the process and taking on some pieces. So I'm just curious from a tooling standpoint, between developer, you hear a lot of times that even within the development organization, different development organizations, you might have different tool sets because developers can decide to pick whatever they want. And then between the ops teams, I'm curious, do you try and standardize across development teams, development and ops teams? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, I do think that's something you do want to corral. That's where your enterprise architecture, I think, becomes really a critical component and leader in the tool choices that the business uses. So where I'm a fan of letting the business do their development, I'm not a fan of letting the business choose whatever tools they want to. I do think that's cost prohibitive and drives the wrong behavior, and it also prohibits those guardrails that we talked about earlier.
Right.
And actually, yeah, it's funny. I think our difference before was a semantic one. Of those 500 engineers, 490 sit in the business units.
Oh, okay.
Right, so I don't control the development. I mean, that is really business unit driven, but I'm controlling the support, which is why you're getting to the tool set. And that's really where we work hard to support what is needed, but it's really an ongoing conversation with the CTO, because he's driving a lot of those standards. It's not up to us to say, hey, that's our standard. It's really the CTO says, hey, these are the technologies we need to be adopting and master in order to be competitive. So I'm in constant dialogue with him and his staff to make sure that what we're doing is in fact the right things. And so that's where that 9 to 12 month process is.
Yep.
We are experimenting together, actually, to be honest. And so
Yeah, last comment. I think the open source tooling is critically important, and you do want anyone in your company to be able to leverage open source, again, kind of under guidance and guideposts.
Great. So on that, thank you, folks. So I think we're out of time here.
Oh, okay.
Very interesting conversation. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
So with that, Julie, appreciate you coming on stage.
you
Folks,
so
give a
much.
hand to our guests,
you.
Julie, David, and Sandhya.